Is the government giving vets the treatment they deserve? That question was front and center in QP today. Lots of heat about funding for programs for soldiers and veterans. It all came ahead of what is expected to be a scathing report from the Auditor General on mental health services for veterans. The government, of course, has made a number of announcements over the last couple of days. Yesterday in Halifax, the Ministers of Defence and Veterans Affairs announced $200 million in funding over 6 years to address mental health issues among serving military and veterans, which will bring the establishment of 9 new operational stress clinic offices across the country. They announced $16.7 million in ongoing funding to support those. And today, Minister Rona Ambrose, the Health Minister, announced $5 million that will be matched by another $5 million from the private funded True Patriot Love Foundation. That's a total of $10 million towards mental health research. Now, all this is in the wake of reports last week that Veterans Affairs actually retired or lapsed $1.1 billion in unspent funds the government coffers had since 2006. Will this new funding be enough to help vets and soldiers and their families deal with mental health issues? And can vets be sure that none of this money will be allowed to lapse? Let's get to our MPs as we wait for the Auditor General's report tomorrow. Erin O'Toole, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade, is joined by Liberal Veterans Affairs critic Frank Valeriot. They're in the House foyer. And in Halifax, the NDP Veterans Affairs critic Peter Stauffer is here. Gents, good to see you. Mr. O'Toole, is all this new money, or is this money being reallocated from other programs?
The majority of this is new money, Evan. The exciting announcement about the Operational Stress Injury Clinic in Halifax and the 7 other satellite clinics is going to be a new series of investments spread across the country, because we know that veterans, when they leave the military, in often cases go back to the province or region they joined in. We're also going to make sure that military family resource centers, an asset that's been used by families on base in recent years, can be used by veterans and their families as they transition, and to be some of the sort of frontline support in early detection and early support for mental health. So this is very important funding. And to put it in context, Evan, because it's important, the first Operational Stress Injury Clinic was opened in 2002 by the Liberal government. There was a few opened then. We've opened 14 over the last number of years, because this is a new and emerging area that we can deliver support.
There's a bit of skepticism. You know, Ministers Nicholson and Fantino made the announcement yesterday, so there's questions. One, who's ultimately accountable for the implementation? Who's accountable for the delivery of the funding to ensure it doesn't lapse? You remember in 2012, reports that interdepartmental bickering over budgets meant mental health counselors were not hired because the screening process was too cumbersome. We've seen a boondoggle before. How does that not happen this time?
That's a great question, Evan. Some of the operational stress injury clinics open now, so the 14 we've opened, and additionally to the 3 that were there. About half are Veterans Affairs administered funding, and then half are Canadian Forces, and those are usually the ones located by bases. Interestingly, though, in some cases, the satellite offices will be provincial, healthcare resources, so provincial psychiatrists, that sort of thing, but with funding from the federal government. This is an area where the Canadian Forces and Veterans Affairs are trying to collaborate more on mental health. Veterans Affairs is taking the lead on most of what are called the OSI clinics, but increasingly we're trying to make sure that veterans or military members put their hand up, and we're trying to get rid of the stigma associated with mental injuries from service while they're in uniform. And one of the changes we've made is to make sure that nobody is released until their medical situation is stabilized.
So let me get Peter Stauffer to react to this. What do you make of this particular, the $200 million and the $5 million today, and how Mr. O'Toole says it will be managed?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate the government for at least raising the issue of post-traumatic stress disorder and OSI. This is a good thing when they do that, because it gets the media attention as well, and allows the debate to happen across the country. The question is whether this is new money or not. Only the estimates will tell, and we simply don't have the figures of the money that may have been returned from 2014 back to the federal treasury. As you know, $1.1 billion was returned from 2006 to the end of 2013, so that money was sent back back to Treasury Board. We don't know how much money this year was gone, so only the estimates will be able to tell us if indeed this is new money. And it was rather surprising how the announcement was done. Very few military family resource centers even knew that this announcement was happening. It was done at the very last minute. Most of the media didn't know. The local base commander hardly knew what was going on, and the opposition, who lives 15 minutes away from the announcement, wasn't even aware or invited to the particular announcement.
Do you think it's a decoy to get away from the fact that tomorrow the AG may have a scathing report on veterans' mental health?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know what the AG is going to say, but it sure looks that way. And the fact that it looks like the government is trying to change the channel. But at the end, Evan, though, to be honest with you, the veteran community out there who need this help don't really care about the politics around it. They just want to make sure that the money is there, the help will be there, the human and financial resources there to help them. That's why we've written a letter that will be going out tomorrow to the three ministers, asking them every 4 months, we'd like an update of where this money is going, which centers have been open, which people have been hired, and exactly what you're doing in the timetables. We want to be able to see this on a quarterly installment to ensure that what the government said yesterday isn't true coming to fruition.
Okay, so that will come up from the NDP. So the NDP want a regular update on the money. Let me move over to Frank Valerian. What's your reaction to the money, the vets funding today?
Well, Evan, we know they lapsed $1.13 billion over the last 8 years. We also know that last week the parliamentary secretary said it went into Treasury, but Julian Fantino, the minister, said it came back to veterans. So their messaging is in conflict right there. Even Aaron's answer to your question, how much of it is new money? He said, well, a majority is new money. So how much of it is really new money? And that's the problem. They keep recycling old announcements into current announcements. And we never know how the shell game is being played. I asked today in Parliament whether this money would lapse. The parliamentary secretary did not answer the question at all. He avoided answering the question. And over 6 years, we know that it's likely to lapse. But here's the point. They had the opportunity to use that $1.13 billion to bring that money back in and fund the programs that the veterans needed, including health care services, mental health care services, and they didn't. It's not like they only found out about this year as a result of our committee report.
You mentioned something, and I just want to make sure Mr. O'Toole has a shot at answering this. This $1.1 billion of lapsed funding since 2006. I know this is statutory funding, and I know the accounting, the difference between discretionary funding, which the government allocates precise, and statutory, which is an estimate. But there has frankly been a disconnect, Mr. Valerian fairly pointed it out, between what your ministers are saying on this. And I want you, if you can, to try to square the circle. Let me show you what Minister Fantino's parliamentary secretary told us on this program on Friday, and what Minister Fantino himself said yesterday.
Each year, the department sets a budget for different programs that are available for Canada's veterans. If that money is not used according to all of those programs that were made available that year, that money goes back to the Treasury.
The funding is allocated, and if it's not spent, it's recycled back into continuing programs and services for veterans. It's not lost money.
Mr. O'Toole, one says it goes back to Treasury Board, general accounting, off it goes. The minister now says, no, it goes back to the ministry itself, Veterans Affairs. The Prime Minister today said it goes back, it goes back into general accounting. This is part of the, which is it?
I think the minister's description is probably the best one, Evan, and I'll tell you why. Estimates, it is not transferring the money and then transferring it back. An estimate is the estimate of how much, particularly the statutory benefits, are going to be called upon throughout the year. And there is meant to be slightly more in there, because if you don't have enough, you actually have to go back to Parliament to get a new budget. But if you don't hit the estimate in what you actually spend, that is what's called the lapse.
Right.
But then
where
it goes
does that,
back
where
in.
is that money? The money's allocated. I understand how it works. The minister says it goes back into general accounting, and your government can use to put down the deficit. Parm Gill said, no, 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 we just keep it in the ministry so we can use it for other Veterans Affairs program. First of all, the fact that there's a disconnect on the interpretation kind of beggars the mind here, because you'd think they'd be on the same page, but which one is it?
I think we have to stick with the word estimate, Evan. If you don't draw upon it, you never actually actualize it. But I think what the minister was driving at was overall the budget is going up. So each year we are spending in new ways on the budgetary side. The statutory side is really where it's been going down, mainly, as I said on your program last week, with more and more of our World War II veterans passing. I have to say quickly about Halifax as the location, Evan. I listen to your show every weekend, the radio show. You were in Halifax for the International Security Forum. That location was chosen because we had a gathering of the top global security and defense minds in the world, all the ministers involved, and so the announcement was made there.
I get it. I just want to get to the bottom of this, and I recognize there's another topic there, but Minister Fantino is quite clearly signaling to veterans, and this is very important, that don't worry, that $1.1 billion since 06 stays, Parm Gill stays within the ministry. Okay, now that would be misleading, sir. So one of them is misleading veterans and the public that that money, not as you said, is an estimate that then isn't spent, but actually remains and they can spend it. This is a very important issue. Were veterans misled that this money has actually not gone anywhere and it's actually can now be reallocated for new issues?
You know, this is getting back to what this is being framed as money was put here and then transferred back to the Treasury. The money was never put there, Evan. It was an estimate of what was the combination of entitlements for veterans, the statutory side, and what was budgeted. The fact that it came in under, I would note the last year, the Liberal government, the Martin government, there was a $100 million lapse. So this is the way Treasury Board's been operating for years.
I understand that.
So it goes back in, and if the budget overall is going up, I think the minister has expressed this well. Veterans can know it's going back into a rising boat.
I'm not saying you're wrong, Mr. O'Toole. I'm saying your explanation doesn't jibe. I'm going to replay the clip, and I'll get Mr. Valeriat and Mr. Stauffer to hear it. These are the two clips. This is how Mr. Fantino explained it, and this is how Parm Gill explained it. And the reason I think it's important to juxtapose this is we're trying to get this story straight on how people understand where that money's gone or if it's just an estimate. Here's what they said.
Each year, the department sets a budget for different programs that are available for Canada's veterans. If that money is not used according to all of those programs that were made available that year, that money goes back to the Treasury.
The funding is allocated, and if it's not spent, it's recycled back into continuing programs and services for veterans. It's not lost money.
And there it is. The minister said it's recycled back into programs. It's not lost money. Sir, you have to be fair. That is very different than what you just said.
Yeah.
Not really, Evan. What it is, it's an estimate, and if you don't meet it, that means you haven't drawn upon the finances of the country to the point you expected. You then have to find out why, and it's in the estimates on why. For younger veterans...
I get that. Okay, I'm going to get Mr. Valerian. I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying Minister Fantino said it's recycled back into programs. Mr. Valerian, am I missing something here? What's your view?
No, you're not missing anything. The money went back into Treasury, and we all Canadians know where this is going. It's going to create a surplus for next year so that they can go into an election and start doling out money so that they can get reelected. Let's get to the bottom line, and let's not kid ourselves. They are in damage control right now. There will be an indicting report tomorrow of the contempt for which Conservatives hold our veterans.
But Mr. Valerian, I recognize how sensitive this is, but you also have to admit lapsed funding is not unique to Conservatives. You Liberals did the same thing.
What I am telling you is that $1.13 billion over 8 years when veterans have been begging for services. They've been begging for better benefits. They've been begging for mental health care services. We've lost 160 service members to suicide. And they have ignored this for several years. And now, between being found out that they didn't spend $1.3 billion and it went back into Treasury, and there being an indicting report tomorrow, they are in damage control.
I have 10 seconds. Mr. Stauffer, you've heard those. What's your view?
There's no question this money went back to Treasury Board to balance the books in order to be able to run into an election with a surplus and be able to dole out funds in other areas. And many, many veterans have gone without basic services across the country. It is quite shameful. We're not sure what the Auditor General will say tomorrow, but I don't think it's going to be a very pleasant day for the Conservatives.
All right, I got to leave it there. We'll wait for that report, obviously, tomorrow. We're trying to get at exactly what this lapsed Money Means, Aaron O'Toole, Peter Stauffer, Frank Valera. You three gentlemen are always good to have in the program, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you.